2026 Artificial Intelligence Forecasts. The forecast for 2026 can be described with the words consolidation and divergence. If 2025 was the year of shocks, shifts in U.S. policy, and the mass embrace of AI, then 2026 will be the time when the consequences of these events finally become part of humanity's daily life. 2026 will likely not be a time of great apocalyptic shifts or utopian breakthrough. Instead, it will be a year of intensifying current trends, deepening key challenges, and the first true signs of how technology and politics are shaping a new reality. The world will become even more fragmented and unequal. The gap between countries, industries, and social groups will deepen. Countries with access to advanced semiconductors and AI, the US, partially China, the EU, will advance rapidly. Others risk being left behind. India, Vietnam, Indonesia, some other Asian countries will maintain growth momentum, while Europe and some developed economies will face stagnation. More extreme weather events, such as heat waves and floods, will burden the poorest regions, which are the least responsible for emissions. Here is a comprehensive portrait of the year awaiting us. Let us consider the main vectors that will always define human life. Geopolitics, a world without old rules. The world has finally adapted to the pragmatic and unpredictable U.S. policy, where the transatlantic alliance is undergoing a fundamental transformation. Instead of traditional unity, a pay-for-security model now dominates, forcing European countries to invest significant funds in their own defense capabilities. This shift not only redistributes the financial burden, but also creates tension within EU political circles, forcing them to reconsider strategic autonomy. Partnership with Washington is now built on a strictly business-like approach, often in exchange for security guarantees. Thus, the geopolitical architecture of the West is acquiring features of a competitive market, not just shared values. Ukraine remains a critical point, and analysts view 2026 as a potential turning point when resources for intensive combat operations may be exhausted. This creates preconditions for the conflict to transition to a frozen phase or to prolonged negotiations initiated under pressure from global players. International support, despite formal commitments, may begin to change as global attention shifts to other crises. Under such conditions, Ukraine faces a difficult dilemma, finding diplomatic solutions without losing sovereignty. However, the end of the intensive phase of the war will not mean peace, but rather a new, more protracted and unstable state of tension. Instead of large traditional wars, gray zone conflicts, difficult to attribute and even harder to respond to, come to the fore. Cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, sabotage of submarine cables and gas pipelines have become routine tools of pressure and warfare. Simultaneously, the struggle for resources in the Arctic is escalating, where melting ice opens new routes and deposits, as well as space confrontation for dominance in navigation and spy orbits. These conflicts are fought in the shadows, often by private companies or mercenaries, blurring the concepts of war and peace. Consequently, national security now depends not only on armies, but also on the resilience of digital networks and communication arteries. Technology. AI becomes a digital colleague. Agentic AI has transformed from an experiment into everyday reality, with about 75% of large companies have integrated autonomous agents into their processes. These systems no longer just respond to queries, they independently plan, make decisions, and execute complex tasks, from organizing logistics chains to writing and testing software code. They operate as digital colleagues, capable of learning on the go and interacting with other systems without constant human supervision. Such transformation radically increases productivity, but simultaneously raises acute questions about management, control, and ethics in an automated environment. Many professions undergo radical change as people focus on creative and strategic aspects, delegating routine work to agents. The main resource of the AI era became not lithium or rare metals, but ordinary electricity, the demand for which from powerful data centers grew to an unprecedented level. This energy hunger has forced governments and corporations to accelerate the development of alternative generation, particularly the construction of small modular nuclear reactors that can be quickly deployed near large computing hubs. Traditional energy infrastructure is under great strain, provoking discussions about priorities, where to direct electricity, to residential homes or to AI servers. As a result, access to stable and cheap energy becomes a key competitive advantage for any developed economy. Cybersecurity faced a new threat with the emergence of real-time deepfakes during video calls, which became a mass problem for businesses and government agencies. Malicious actors can now in real time imitate the face, voice, and manner of speaking of executives, giving harmful orders or extracting confidential information. To combat this phenomenon, states have begun implementing biometric digital passports, encrypted digital identifiers that confirm the identity of the interlocutor on the other end of the line. This technology, however, gives rise to new debates about privacy and the protection of personal biometric data. Therefore, 2026 became the year when technological progress simultaneously creates and solves security problems in the digital world.
Climate, the year of climate seesaws. Climatologists predict that 2026 has a high chance, around 86%, of becoming the warmest year in recorded history, or finally solidifying the planet's average temperature above the key threshold of plus 1.5 degrees Celsius. This is not just another temperature record, but a symbol of the transition to a new climatic regime, the consequences of which are becoming irreversible. Waves of extreme heat will last longer, affecting even regions previously unaccustomed to such phenomena. Such conditions strike at population health, agriculture, and energy systems operating at their limits due to the mass use of air conditioners. The world is witnessing with its own eyes the realization of the darkest model forecasts of recent decades. The world increasingly faces the effect of climate seesaws, when prolonged droughts are instantly replaced by catastrophic downpours and floods, leaving ecosystems and people no time to adapt. Regions like California and Mediterranean countries have become especially vulnerable to such sharp fluctuations. Drought depletes soils, making them unable to absorb water when rain finally comes, leading to rapid runoff, mud flows, and destruction. Such anomalies destroy traditional agricultural models and livelihoods. This is vivid proof that climate change manifests not only in slow warming, but also in sharp, chaotic fluctuations that pose the greatest danger. The green transition has acquired features of harsh pragmatism. Companies and countries are massively switching to renewable energy, not so much for the sake of environmental friendliness, but due to direct economic benefit. Wind and sun in many regions have become cheaper than energy from fossil fuels, even without carbon taxes. This economic expediency is the most powerful driver of change, accelerating investments in renewables and storage technologies. State subsidies are now more often directed not at supporting green initiatives as such, but at developing a stable and independent energy sector for strategic reasons. Thus, the fight against climate change has transformed from a moral imperative into a sound economic strategy. Society and culture. The main unifying event of the year will be the 2026 FIFA World Cup, hosted by the USA, Canada, and Mexico. Against the backdrop of deep geopolitical divisions and internal disputes, this large-scale sports festival will be seen as humanity's attempt to feel unity and shared joy. The tournament is expected to break all attendance and TV audience records, becoming a temporary distraction from pressing problems. For the hosts, it is also a chance to demonstrate technological innovations in event organization and influence their global image. At the same time, the tournament will not avoid political protests and calls for boycott, reminding of the complex interaction between sports and global politics. As a counteraction to digital fatigue and constant life online, the trend of returning to offline gained powerful development in 2026. This manifests in the popularization of micro-events, small live meetings, concerts, or workshops where smartphone use is limited or prohibited.
People are increasingly seeking authentic experience, emotional sincerity, and genuine communication that even the most perfect artificial intelligence cannot reproduce. This movement is a kind of cultural defense against excessive digitalization, an attempt to regain control over attention and social connections. Business responds to this demand by creating new spaces and formats for quality offline interaction. Space tourism receives a new impetus with the preparation for the Artemis II mission, a crewed flight around the moon. This event returns to humanity a sense of large-scale optimism, technological progress, and national and international pride in scientific achievements. Space once again becomes the center of public attention, not as a field for military confrontation, but as a new frontier for exploration and inspiration. The mission's success will stimulate investments in the space industry and popularize STEM education among young people. Thus, deep space exploration becomes an important cultural phenomenon, uniting people on both sides of geopolitical barriers around a shared dream of the future.
Conclusion. The world is entering a new phase of volatile geopolitics, where traditional alliances are being transformed. Instead of unity, the transatlantic partnership is being built on a security-for-pay principle, forcing Europe to invest in its own defense, which creates internal tension. Ukraine faces a critical juncture in 2026 when resource exhaustion could trigger a shift of the conflict into a frozen phase or prolonged negotiations. Simultaneously, gray zone conflicts are gaining momentum. Cyber attacks, infrastructure sabotage, and the scramble for resources in the Arctic and space blurring the lines between war and peace. Technological progress is defined by the rise of agentic artificial intelligence, which is transforming into a digital colleague, but simultaneously spawns an energy hunger and new cybersecurity threats, such as real-time deep fakes. The climate crisis manifests through extreme weather swings, making 2026 potentially the hottest year on record, forcing a shift to green energy for economic, not just environmental reasons. In society, the search for authenticity and offline communication intensifies as a reaction to digital fatigue, while large-scale events like the FIFA World Cup and the Artemis II mission to the moon strive to unite humanity in the face of global divisions.